Welcome, welcome to another episode of the Haven podcast for your soul. So we are excited today because we have a guest who has a story to tell and who is going to bring some insights into our life on today. So I'm excited to have you, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and let you go ahead right on in and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and the journey of you getting to the place of writing your book and your research and things of that
Yes.
nature.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
So my name is Michael Menard, and I've written a book. The title of the book is The Kite That Couldn't Fly. And I'll tell you more about that as we go through the talk. But just the journey, I'm one of 14 children, and I was raised by a awesome mother, um, but raised also by a father that was shaped by his own trauma.
Mm.
And that was the introduction of trauma into our family. We were very poor. We lived in a 900 square foot home for 16 people,
Oh, wow.
and it was a very interesting life. And I remember all these childhood stories, so I've been working on this book for 30 years, and then finally decided to do it. So 2 years ago, I buckled down, started writing 4 hours every morning. And through that process, I realized some of the stories I was including in the book were heavy. Um, and I solicited help from some psychiatrists and psychologists to
Mhm.
help me write the book. And in the middle of it, I was made aware by these experts that what I and my siblings had experienced was complex childhood trauma.
Mm.
And I never thought of it that way, but when they explained what actually happened, and when I reflected back on my life, um, two of my siblings died from drug overdose because of that toxic stress.
Mhm.
A number of them suffer ailments from it, and so I did research and understood what happens to us
Mhm.
if we experience childhood trauma, and found out that it is very, very devastating on
Yeah.
many levels. Um, so I became depressed. I wasn't going to do the book. I realized that things I had experienced in my life, and I was sharing all this with my siblings. And one of my brothers decided to seek therapy for recovery of childhood trauma.
Mhm.
And he went through 7 sessions, and it was for him, it was life changing, because it is healable. That's the important thing for the audience to know. It is healable. So the book took a more serious turn
Mhm.
because I found in my research, I went into a deep kind of a funk, kind of went underwater with research and consumed everything I could find on the subject, interviewed psychiatrists, psychologists, talked to 18 of them, and understood something that was just shocking to me, is that we live in a crisis of childhood trauma.
Mhm.
CDC says that 60% of all adults in the United States are suffering from childhood trauma. That's 157 million people in the United States. And when childhood trauma strikes, regardless of the age, it changes everything. It,
Before we go,
yes,
I want to ask you a question.
sure.
Um, Now, when you were going through and as you became an adult, a teenager, young adult, and then into your manhood, did you did you think that what you went through was normal, or did you perceive it to be normal?
I,
Abnormal?
I thought it was normal. I thought it was normal. And adults that emerge from childhood trauma take one of two paths. It's called a paradox of childhood trauma. You either use the trauma as rocket fuel for success, like I did,
Mm-hmm.
or you crumble under it into mental illness, relationship issues, physical ailments. No one knows why. But even if you achieve this post traumatic growth like I did, you still are not immune to the physical and psychological disorders that come from it.
Mm-hmm.
So those who, like, I've had a very successful life. I have 14 patents. I've started many businesses. I'm currently the founder of a worldwide software company. So very successful by all standards, right?
Yeah.
Should a boy who's raised in poverty and trauma succeed? No, you shouldn't, but some do.
Mhm.
And those who have experienced that post-traumatic growth, they have their own addictions. Mine was, I was a workaholic. I wanted to make enough money so that it would never run out, because I know what hungry feels like. And so
Mhm.
I didn't even realize until I wrote this book, and now I'm 73,
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
realizing and sharing it in the book of what happens. And um, it's just devastating to the individual. But the good news is it's healable.
I like what you said, because I think that's very important to pinpoint or to call out, is that there's two paths that one can take from when they emerge from this childhood trauma, right? The successful path or the crumbling path.
Yes.
A lot of times what people that come from this don't realize is that, for one, they have been through such traumatic events in their life that has shaped them and their mind frame, um and now, depending on the path that they're on, how much of the blame they put on themselves. Because no matter, those who choose the path to not be as successful, that crumble under pressure, they have this thing where they blame themselves or they blame others
Yes.
for what is going on within their lives.
Yeah. So that's a great point, Brianna. Childhood trauma is so deep seated. Many of us don't even remember what happened, but we have the ill effects of what's happened. And it's so deep seated that we believe we did it to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right, we blame ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So on that subject of blame, as you start thinking and discovering and going back to your past, don't use it don't use it as an excuse to blame other people or to become a victim.
Mm-hmm.
Because the minute you think of yourself as a victim, you don't look for healing. So forgive, move on, forgive yourself, know that you're stronger than you ever thought. You survived, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's
yeah.
hard, but it's hard, and we're gonna move on. But I think it's really important for the audience to know, because I come across so many different people who cannot let go, who can't get out of that place of playing victim. No matter how much you try to speak to them about they can be healed, that they can forgive, and how much forgiveness really is causing them to be in a prison within themselves, regardless of how successful they are, or regardless of how, wherever they are at in life, they're in prison to their thoughts, in prison to the way that they view and see the world.
Yes.
um and so, how did you go, um as you were on your path, how did you learn to forgive? How did you really let go?
I think the very first step, um, in is making a conscious decision to heal, to make a conscious decision to feel better. And if you feel like something needs to change, then you better get on it and figure it out. So it doesn't take much education or reading or philosophy to understand that the lack of forgiving is destructive to yourself, not to the person who caused the harm. But it's biblical as well, right?
Mhm,
It's
mhm,
biblical as well. So you have to begin by forgiving, and only then can you step across that line into healing, because the victimhood will keep you from your for being the person God made you to be. So you've got to have people around you that love you and are listening to you and tell you that as well. And people like you, Brianna, who's spreading the message to
mhm,
saying, hey, folks, it's now time.
mhm.
Let's do it today. Us all together. Let's flush that right down the toilet. Let's step into grace. Let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
to healing, because it's all very possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, I think that's really good because here it is, and I know you said your age. You don't look at, let me say, tell you
Thank you,
that.
dear. Thank you.
Yes, but here it is, you're sitting at what you said 73. But
Yes.
you can tell that you are relaxed. You can tell that you don't have um what I would see normally people have on them that have not let things go from their past. Especially when you tell me that 2 years ago you began to write a book, and I'm guessing that some of the stories that you began to write, or maybe some of the things that began to come to your memory, were things that you kind of forgot about.
Absolutely. That process of opening doors, right? Of opening doors that have been closed for 60 years, 65 years. All
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden they're coming back so vivid because you're making the opportunity for that to happen. So I actually made a conscious choice during that tough time of writing the book to grab the hand of myself, my child self, that little boy, and say, hey, it's going to be okay. Let's
Mm-hmm.
walk into this house. Let's go back, and we're going to learn, and we're going to heal, and we're going to share that with people. So it
Oh.
was a moment, a defining moment of um, a lot of. I'm a happy guy. I've been a happy guy my whole adult life. But when I started this process, my wife actually midway through said, "Michael, you got to put yourself out of that hole. I've never seen you in a funk like this." Well, that's part of the healing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't call it by its name. If you don't face the monster, you're not going to be able to heal from it.
Yeah.
And some of my siblings are using professional therapists to help. I have not, but I have. I'm so educated. I've read every book on the subject. So I take the good, the bad. I look for, and I've talked to experts in the world, which is therapeutic in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, I've understood what's happened to me. I understand what happened to my mind, my body, my soul, what happened to relationships, and and emerged from it. And I suggest for everyone to go through that not to write a book, but to go through the process of sitting and saying, it's not about what's wrong with you, it's about what happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's also not about what happened, it's about what didn't happen to you. What neglect was there in the early years of nurturing?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you didn't get it in the first 3 months of life, this is research. If you
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that bonding with a mother, where the mother's holding the baby, nursing the baby, you know, every the baby knows within the first 3 months if it's in a safe environment, if it's in a loving environment, if it can love itself, and
Mm-hmm.
all that manifests itself in adulthood from the first 3 months of life.
Yeah.
It's all research. It's all data. It's not just a guess. So, message out there to parents that, don't worry about spoiling your baby by holding your baby. Hold your baby.
Mm-hmm.
Love your baby. Over love your baby.
Yeah.
It has a tremendous impact
Mm.
on our world. And fathers have a role too. Um, two parents is the best combination. Two loving parents.
Mm-hmm.
There are 20 million children today in the United States living without fathers.
Yes.
What's
Yeah.
going to happen to them as adults? What are
Mm-hmm.
their relationships going to be like?
Yeah.
So it's very, it's just, I consider it a crisis that we're in, that no one has been talking about, that 60 to 70% of every adult has been affected.
Mm-hmm. And we want people want to try to change the narrative and try to make it seem as though it's all right, but it's not all right. I
Oh,
always know a father plays such a major role in both male and female. They really do shape the identity of the child. And without that, that's why we see a lot of things that we're seeing now. Um, a lot of the violence, a lot of the self-hate, and the depression, and the identity crisis and things of that nature, because who are they looking to we as moms, we nurture, but if I'm left there alone to have to do both the roles, then I have to work, right? And I have to
It's
do,
awful.
it's
It's
awful.
for everybody. It's awful for the mom. It's awful for the
Yes,
children.
yes.
And these, another statistic that 90% of all boys raised without a father end up in prison.
Mm-hmm.
85% of all females raised in a house without a father will be teen pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
That cycle continues.
Yeah.
Teen pregnancy, most likely the father's not going to be around.
Mm-hmm.
So it just can generations and generations. Somebody's got to stand up and say, we got to stop this.
Yeah.
We got to help these people. We got to find ways of
Mm-hmm.
restoring, the family.
Yeah.
But that's another subject. That's a
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
subject.
Yeah. Because it sounds like both me and you can go on a
We
on a
could,
tangent
we could,
about it.
yeah,
But I wanted to know, I want us to get into, more of your process of your book. And I want us to really touch on the effects of childhood trauma and the relationships,
okay, yep,
the
yep,
effects of the relationships, because I think that is good. Because um, so I'm gonna just go ahead and let you, because my mind
sure,
goes and
sure,
it's got
sure.
so much in it.
I'll, so when you say relationships to me, that just pushes a button, and I'll talk, because what happens? Think of sufferers. They emerge as adults, and what happens in childhood trauma is that the child is constantly in a state of survival,
Mhm.
regardless of the age, 6, 8, 10. They don't know what's coming next. So their body overproduces this chemical called cortisol, which we need for fight and flight. But if a constant flow of if the cortisol comes, it affects the brain development in a negative way. So you develop wrongly your worldview, your perceptions, your ability to socialize. Now let's just talk about that as the kind of the psychological disintegration based on that. But there's also the physical. We'll talk about that. But what drives the relationship issues is the psychological impact and the way that the brain formed out of childhood that we don't even understand.
Mhm.
You hear things like boys will be boys, or she's having a bad day, but what happens is there's this manifestation of mental disorders that we take as normal, and we don't even know why it happened. So the way it manifests itself in relationships is, number one, you have a very difficult time attaching. Attachment is difficult.
Mhm.
Intimacy is difficult because you don't trust. You don't even know why. They say, oh, she's just cold, or he's just a bad player. No, it's because of their psychology and what happens. So now you bring a relationship together. High probability, one or both of those people in that relationship have
Mhm.
suffered childhood trauma.
Mm.
Almost guaranteed, based on statistics, that one of them will have suffered. So the disorders begin in the relationship. And things like, you'll hear a woman say, he just doesn't talk to me.
Mhm.
I want to know what he's thinking. He just doesn't talk to me. So what happens is the intimacy fails, the relationships fail. So now you're sleeping in separate beds.
Mm.
And all of a sudden you're finding that physical need someplace else that has nothing to do with the relationship.
Mhm.
So it leads to infidelity. So the greatest symptom of someone who's an adult who's experienced childhood trauma is failed relationships.
Mm.
There's two types. I mean, there's three types of relationships: great relationships, uh, troubled relationships, which lead to no relationships.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right? I had a
Yeah.
person reach out to me from the book, found me, sent me an email and says, "Listen, I don't think I can go on another day.
Mm.
I've lost my family. I've lost my job. I don't want to get dressed." It was depression, right? Depression.
Mhm.
It's a killer. It's a killer. So, and then that flows over to the spiritual, which is saying, God must not love me if I feel this way. If he let this happen to me,
Mm-hmm.
and if you take all the tears in the world and put them in a bucket, the biggest bucket's going to have the label unloved.
Yeah.
And if you're failing at relationships, you're not going to get the love you need to be a whole person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, the message is to anyone who's, and relationships are not easy.
No.
Even without childhood trauma, they are not easy. But think, dig down in your soul, dig down in your mind, your past, and think, is this normal? This fighting, this bickering, this separation between me and my partner, me and my children, me and my friends, is
Mm-hmm.
it normal? It's not normal. So think about how you can step across that line into a world of improvement and healing for yourself, so you can show up for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, how did you, because you said that you have always been a normally happy individual. So coming out of your home, where did you find that joy? Where did you
Well,
find?
I'll tell you, my childhood wasn't all bad. There was two sides to that. One is this beautiful mother, a woman of God, who taught us the Bible. We read the Bible in its entirety before we were 16, and she was such a believer, and
Mhm.
she, forgave her husband, our father, tried to
Mhm.
teach us to forgive him, and she taught beautiful things like gratitude. If you have a mindset of gratitude, no matter how poor you are, you focus on what you have, not what you don't have. So I grew up being so thankful and
Mhm.
being taught that the Lord loves a thankful heart.
Yes. Yeah.
So it just works all in your favor. So
Mhm.
I came into adulthood with some very positive traits, and sadly, not all of my siblings brought that as well.
Mhm.
A lot of them, there's 11 that are living, and they're just awesome people.
Yeah.
You can see a lot of the paradox there in post-traumatic growth and the teachings of a loving mother, but it was hampered. I have a brother, my oldest brother, he's 74, a man of God, very successful by all measures. But through
Mhm.
this work, through this sharing of what I was learning with my siblings, he kind of opened up and said he's been suffering from anxiety and depression for 20 years,
Mhm.
trying to get help for 20 years. And they diagnosed him as ADHD, different medications, nothing helped. Why? He was suffering from childhood trauma. And
Mhm.
those things get stuck in the base of your brain, and they keep coming back until they can be dealt with by a professional. So
Mhm.
I don't know if you've heard of EDMR therapy.
Mhm.
That's what he chose, and he's such a spokesperson for it now.
Oh, wow.
That that you know so so he's very successful, very happy, great family, but he suffered
Yeah.
sleeplessness, anxiety, doubt, all
Mhm.
because of the brain function that was created when he was 6 or 7 years old. He didn't
Mm.
even know
Oh, wow.
it. Yeah.
Now, do you mind however, whatever level you feel comfortable, could you give us an example of something that you went through that was traumatic, that you thought was normal, but it was traumatic?
Yeah,
Um,
yes, I'm happy to share. And all of this is in the book, and some of the chapters in the book are beautiful stories. Some are devastating. So
mhm.
I'll just give you a few samples. The first, for my personal one, is that my father, when I was 12, I had my first job. I cleaned up a high-end restaurant. I cleaned up and closed up at night, and he said, "Hey, why don't you steal some steaks, put them down the back of your pants, and we'll have steak when I get off my shift at midnight." So that's fine, great. I thought that was my father was saying do it, so I did it. I then He then said, your mother needs some silverware. Why don't you put some silverware in your front pocket, steaks in the back? So I'm trying to keep my pants up with all the shit I'm stealing as I'm
Mhm.
going into the house, and my mother caught me and brought me to the restaurant, and I got humiliated, and I had to work for 18 months with no pay that off. So I put it in the category of mild. Another serious one that happened to my brother, but we all witnessed it, is that, my dad taught us all how to steal, and one of my younger brothers stole a chrome gas cap for one of his friends. He got caught, he got brought to the police. My dad had to go get him, brought us into the house and said, "Hey, son, which hand did you use to steal that cap?" And he says, "This one." My dad grabbed that hand and put it right into the stove top that was lit, and burned all the skin off of his hand. So that's the worst. That's the worst example of, that's physical trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That's physical trauma. So that is, that's the spectrum. Also, I had times where there was no food. I had times where I was, I didn't starve, obviously. I mean, you can see I made it out okay. But having food insecurity, not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, or if it's going to be enough, and
Mm-hmm.
worrying about my siblings having food, is devastating. It's devastating. So
Mm-hmm.
those are examples of day-to-day life that I kind of just thought were normal until I became an adult and realized, and these psychologists said, you experienced the worst kind of trauma possible.
Mm-hmm.
And neglect, lack of security, and it was just, and the stories go on and on. I suggest you read the book. Hey, everybody out there, buy that book, because
Yeah.
there's 25 stories, and they all have reflections at the end about
Mm-hmm.
what I learned and what message I would like to tell my readers based on
Mm-hmm.
my own experiences and what's happened in my life
Yeah.
as a story of redemption. Right? I have a good ending in my story. Not
Yeah.
all my siblings had a good ending. They had
Mm-hmm.
if I knew then what I know now, those brothers would still be alive.
Yeah.
I'm confident they'd still be alive, because I would have understood what was happening and why they were taking drugs, why it was self-medicating to suppress their depression and their anxiety from childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sorry about your loss.
thank
I really am. And I understand it because I mean, I know someone personally who for their entire adult life, that's all they did was suppress those memories of what happened to them, and they never spoke about it, and I think what's important for the audience to take away from this too, as we continue to talk, is that it's really is a time to start talking about the things that you went through, and we all know once now that we're grown what's normal and what's not normal, especially as parents. Now we
you.
know inwardly
Yeah,
what is normal and what's not normal. And just even though they're your parents, we understand that there was a level, some of us, there was a level of neglect and abuse, emotional, physical, psychological, and it's bothering you today. But today is the day that I believe that we need to start speaking out about it and really getting it out, because the longer that we suppress it, the longer that we hold on to it, the longer we're going to be sick.
absolutely. And I think if I could give one message to your listeners and to my readers, is you are not alone. You might feel alone. You are not alone. We've all experienced this, or we know someone who's experienced this. So, the first step in recovery, I have a website. It's the name of the book, the Kite That Couldn't Fly.com. It has a section on there, The Promise of Healing. And I share in there on that website 6 things that I suggest to someone who is hurting.
Mm-hmm.
The last one is therapy. There's other things you can do before you get to therapy. But the
Mm-hmm.
very first one is understand the importance of having someone who loves you and is willing to listen to you. Without that, you don't have a chance for healing. So if you don't have somebody, find somebody. And
Mm-hmm.
your partner is more willing than you understand if you just open up and share what's happened in your life, and have these, make space for a conversation. Once you make space, it's amazing what comes out,
Yeah.
right? And that begins the process.
Yeah.
You have no idea how freeing that is once you can heal from this trauma, and
Mm-hmm.
almost everyone can heal.
Yeah.
It's all possible.
Yeah. now, and I want, and again, I want everybody that is listening, I want you to go out and I want you to buy the book. It's available on Amazon, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So make sure, and we're gonna have the links in the bio and the description and all of that. So
You.
as soon as you get off, please make sure you go and you get this book, because just from snippets of it and speaking with you, Michael, I know that it contains nothing but healing
Yeah.
for those who will take the time to read it. And I wanted us to talk about, because you're married now, and how did any of the things that you dealt with, did it affect your marriage, your relationship with your wife?
Well, yes. I had a first marriage, and I had 4 daughters from that marriage. And we, as parents, made sure that the generational trauma stopped with me.
Mm-hmm.
So they are those girls are all healthy, happy, um, nurtured, you know, women. Um,
Yeah.
but I had a failed relationship, pretty much the whole relationship. And
Mm.
I'm not blaming. I just know that, if I knew now what I knew then, that marriage would not have failed. I
Yeah.
know that. I know that. But I have a second marriage of now 13 years. And before anything else, she heard all my stories. She knew exactly what happened. And, just to show the kind of healing that can come from a loving partner, um, I told her a story about me trying out for baseball when I was 12, and I didn't make the team because I didn't have a baseball glove. I had to try out with my bare hands, and shame on those coaches, right? Shame on those coaches. But that was deep-seated disappointment in my mind. On my first birthday, she gave me a baseball glove, and I don't need a baseball glove, but I have it. I have it sitting in a prominent place, and just that show of love. I could have bought that glove 20 years ago myself, but I didn't, and I don't know why. But she's listened and she's heard, and she, has promoted the healing without, just automatically in a loving relationship. But our relationship began in the first date or 2 dates of saying, "Hey, let me tell you my story."
Yeah.
There's a lot of things we need to talk about if we're going to spend our lives together and get
Yeah.
this all out, which couples hardly ever do, right?
No, they don't. They don't. I mean, I think that I'm listening to you talk, and a lot of my conversations with a lot of females mostly, and then some males, but men don't normally, they're not that vulnerable.
No, no. Yes, and the older we are, the less vulnerable. They just don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But my advice to every guy I meet, every man I meet, everything I write or say is to, hey, guys, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
You can cry. Boys do cry because we,
Mm-hmm.
we were raised with, hey, big boys don't cry. Be tough. So what do? We close up, right? So
Yeah.
boys, men, open up to your women.
Yeah. Yeah. That is such a beautiful story. It is such a beautiful story, and it just speaks of hope for those who are just waiting on
Yeah.
their person. I want to ask you to, because it sparked the interest to so how were you on the job? So you have a lot of accomplishments. I read your bio.
No,
I'm
no,
like, man,
that's a burning question. Okay, it's a burning question. So I'll try to make this quick. So in my whole life, I have been an extrovert. I love people. They love me. When I was in 8th grade, I won the award of Mr. Personality
uh,
and Mr. Popularity at the same time. And that was the first time that happened in school. I was the prom king. I was extremely successful in business. I went up through the ranks of Johnson and Johnson, primarily based on my showmanship and personality.
wow.
So I was a candidate. This was back in 2000, year 2000. I was one of the 4 candidates to be the next CEO of Johnson and Johnson.
Mm.
So they put me with a industrial psychologist to make sure I had what it took to be able to stand the pressures of a CEO position. And in my mind, I said, it's a cakewalk. I don't need I can do that job. Just give me the job.
Yeah.
Well, I had 6 months of a psychiatrist interviewing me, talking to me, sharing. And what she found, she said, Michael, this is not what I'm supposed to tell you, but you are so unhappy in your world, of the corporate world. You're successful because you're making money. You think that's the measure of success and happiness. But you think you're a level 10 happiness. She says, you're about a level 2. You're just trying so hard. And it was like a knife in my heart. I realized she was right. And she said, you're not made for this. You're made for humanity.
Oh,
You're made to help people. You're made to change people's lives.
yeah.
Now go in to the library tomorrow and spend the day in the library. Come back and tell me the next day, where did you end up? And I ended up in psychology.
Wow.
And the mind. And she said, that's what you need to do. So I quit that day. I resigned. I was reporting to the chairman. Chairman says, you can't quit. You'll never make, I was 47. You'll never make this kind of money. Someplace else, I said, I'm tired of making money. It's not about making money anymore. So I shifted. I created a large corporation that had to do with teaching corporations how to be human and how to be happy, and then success will flow. So I wrote a book called Fish in Your Ear. Let me be the fish in your ear. That was a business book. So I stepped out of the corporate world and found true happiness for the first time. So I was just going on automatic, like many people do, to succeed and achieve, and the next promotion and the next raise and the next badge on your arm. Look at me.
Yeah.
The next patent for me, it was the next big idea. And I realized I can stop that race. And this is not what happiness is. Yeah. So you asked the leading question, what was I like in the workplace? Well, I was a rock star. I was a rock star, but I was faking it. Because this is what I want to do. Talk to people like you. Yeah. Write books that are going to change people's lives. And now I realize that the rest of my life is going to be dedicated to raising awareness to the devastation of childhood trauma. So I'm starting with this book. I've now created a foundation, a nonprofit I'm going to get donations from major corporations, and I'm going to raise awareness further, and I'm going to offer free therapeutic services for anyone who's suffering from childhood trauma. That's going to be paid for by the foundation. So I'm going to be the spokesperson. I'm going to be the poster child. Yeah. Because I realize now how big of a deal it is, and that nobody's taken that on. So I'm going to take it on. And I know how to do big things. Yeah. I know what to do because I've had 50 years of practice. So I'm going to do it, and I'm going to talk to anybody who's willing to talk to me. And if I change one life, if you and I change one life today from your audience, it was well worth it. Yeah. And they're going to change a life, right? Yeah. They're going to see the power of hope. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is so good. I mean, it's so rich and so good. Because there's so much you said within what you just said. So I'm hoping that everybody heard. Money doesn't make you happy. Making money does not make you happy. We were all created for the betterment of humanity. And until we all find our path in life of what it is we're supposed to do to help humanity, we will never experience the fullness of joy.
That's right. And the money will flow. The money will come if you stop focusing on it, particularly if you are a believer. you can fall onto the scripture and you can understand that, there were times when we were there's a chapter in the book called God's Love Comes From Everywhere. My father was in the hospital. He had a heart attack. We had no money. We had no credit at the grocery store. We had no food. And I was 12, and I had a bunch of siblings that were just hungry. And my mother, with me, fell to our knees. She was so confident. She said, "Don't worry, Michael. You think the Lord who gave us these children will let these children starve?" There was a knock on the door 5 minutes later. Came to the door, and there was this basket of food with an envelope on top. And in the envelope was $500. That was back in 1960. $500. And a note that said, "God's love comes from, comes from everywhere." So that was a miracle. They do happen. But it came from her deep faith, her demonstration of that faith. And then she looked at me like, "Oh, you have such little faith."
Yeah.
Worry? Did you worry? And there was a celebration. And in those days, that money was the equivalent of $3,000 in today's money. It was enough money to pay for food for her family for 4 months.
Yes.
From that one gift. Who did it come from? A church, maybe? Maybe God just dropped it on the porch. So the point is, turn your life to those things that keep you whole, that make you whole, that can help humanity, and you'll be just fine.
Oh my gosh, you are helping me.
Again.
Yes, you are helping me. It serves such a reminder of, oh my gosh. It made me think about my own story when I was raising my children as a single mother, and not knowing where our next meal was gonna come from, and just believing that God, I'm like,
you lived it.
Yeah. And it's like, God, you're not gonna, because you will be a liar, and having that miracle to take place. I mean, just focusing on, one of my mentors, he says, keep the main thing the main thing. Keep the main thing the main thing.
I like that.
Yeah, and everything will work out. This is so beautiful.
Yeah, Brianna, one other thing I'm finding through, again, research, just my own personal research, that the churches are filled with people suffering from childhood trauma. Because they think just working harder, praying more, and sometimes miracles do happen. Sometimes you will be healed from that. But a lot of people are not. And you got to let the Lord work in different ways. And the different ways sometimes is therapy and other people helping you.
Yes.
So being a believer, doesn't solve it all. You got to take it to the next step.
I think that's good. Because one of the things I fight for, and I fight against. I fight against people being put into leadership positions within a church when I know that mentally they're not ready. When I can see that there's a little boy or a little girl that is fighting for attention, that is fighting to be seen, who is fighting to have a voice, and it's like the pulpit or any type of leadership within a ministry is not the place. We need to go get healed first before placing them there, because after a while they're gonna crumble, and they're really gonna find themselves in a path of destruction. And it's just gonna be like a pit that has no ending for them if we continue to do this. And we're seeing it now. How many people have been successful, but yet never dealt with this stuff back here. Now it's caught up to them.
Right. Yeah, exactly right. The leadership, and I got to find a way. There's just, I got so many things I'm trying to or want to do, but our churches need to be like the ER, the ER for spiritual and for needs like childhood trauma. They need to be childhood trauma educated and friendly. They can help heal, because that's standing between the sufferer and God. That's a space between them, that
Mhm.
you want to get people closer to God, you got to heal them. You got
Mhm.
to heal yourself first, but then you got to heal these people so that
Mhm.
they can come to God whole, because their brokenness many times is keeping them away. Even
Yes.
though Scripture says, it should bring you closer, but it gives another excuse to not trust God or not believe in God, because look what God did to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Look how He hurt me.
Yeah, yeah. I have a nonprofit, and part of that nonprofit is just for strictly for leaders. And it's a safe place for them to be able to come and talk, and to be able to truly be transparent,
Oh,
and deal with those types of issues, because within the church, you're told that there's, because of traditional wrong teachings, certain things you shouldn't be dealing with, and that's such a lie. If you've
yeah,
never dealt with it, you
yeah,
have to deal with it. You're
yeah,
gonna have to
yeah.
deal with it. And this is, and so we have this safe space for them to be able to come and just really talk about it. And then with my training, with who I am, I'm able to take them backwards, because you come in with this flower, but let's go backwards. And now let's deal with what you've never dealt with from mom or from dad, or, or whatever the root of the issue is.
Yeah, it's the thing behind the thing behind the thing. That's what it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I love it. I love it. And when you get your things up and running, please let us know. Send us some links. And so,
I will.
uh, we would love to try to support you in any way that we can. Uh,
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. I
yes,
will. I'll stay in touch, Brianna.
yes, yes.
Thank you.
Now tell us again, give us the name of your book again. Tell us where
Oh,
we can find it.
yeah,
And
yeah. The book is The Kite That Couldn't Fly. And it's on Amazon. It's available anywhere books are available. It's released June 1st, but you can pre-order it right now.
Mhm.
And also, I really encourage you to go to the website. The website is the name of the book: www.thekitethатcouldn'tfly.com. Go there. You can reach me there. You can, if you have a question for me, we can have a dialogue through that website. Um, so that's how to reach me. And I will. The foundation is just being formed. It's
Okay.
the May Avenue Foundation. I grew up on a house on May Avenue, so I'm calling it the May Avenue Foundation. And it's been established, but it has not been opened. But as soon as it opens, I'll send you a link, and I'm all over social media, so we'll stay in touch. And I appreciate your help. Any way
Yeah.
I can help you, Brownie, you let me know.
I will. I will. Thank you. Thank you. It was such a pleasure to have you on here. I thank you for being transparent. I thank you for all the
Thanks.
work that you do. I really do. And again, y'all, please go out and support Michael, and buy his book. The links are going to be in the description. So please, let's pre-order and let us begin to heal. It is time. It is well overdue. For our souls to really heal, and so that we can really experience life and experience it in the way that God wants us to experience it, and have a life that is so abundantly blessed, not because of the things we have, but because our souls are
Yeah.
whole, and that we are benefiting, and we are helping out humanity as we live. And so let us make sure that we are supporting. Again, we thank you for joining us. We thank you for your willingness, and just for the work that you do. Until next time, I love y'all, and remember that I am always praying for y'all.
Thank you. Very nice, Brandon.